This is Jordan Poyer, safety for the Buffalo Bills, and you are now listening to Cover One Buffalo Podcast. Let's go.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo Podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, and tonight we are diving into the next in our position preview series with running backs. And who better to have on than Cover One's resident running back himself, Erik Turner. Erik, how we doing?
Not too bad, Greg. Man, it's been a while. I'll tell you what, I haven't played running back in many years, but it almost feels like I haven't been on the podcast in that long as well, man.
No, we're glad to have you back. You've been turning out some awesome video breakdowns. For anybody who's not doing that or only follows Erik or myself or the Cover One account on Twitter, make sure you're going on the YouTube channel. There's some awesome different breakdowns. Erik's cut them up into some really nice setups with just short little versions of it to see one concept, one play, one idea, especially some of the topics that are coming up that you hear people talking about. There's some really nice clips there. So I just wanted to give you kudos. It's really coming along well. And I think coming off really strong for all the different topics that are coming up with the Bills roster this year.
Thanks, man. You know, it's something that I think I'm almost through the Dallas game. The Dallas game's taken me almost all week because it was such a good game by the offense. And so I'm trying to break down basically every passing concept that Dable and Allen ran last year so that I can get a better idea of, you know, down and distance when they went to this concept, what they like to use in the red zone. And eventually, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I can put together, each concept in a little written article, real brief, explain, the concept itself, and then eventually, throw those videos in there. So it'll be pretty quick rundown of, okay, this is where his eyes should be from 1 to 2 to 3. And then this is what happened as the year progressed. He took a step back, he took a step forward, all the different variables that could come up in a play concept, in a play, and why it worked and why it didn't work. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks that does wrap up and I can put that out to you guys.
Awesome. I see you're rocking the Cover One shirt today. For many people that follow me on Twitter knows I have a bit of a problem with buying different Bills t-shirts and things that are going on. So I did stumble into a new one, and I have a new.
I like it, man. I like it.
I couldn't wait all the way until August 9th, which is the show with Brad Kelly doing the wide receiver breakdown. So I probably will break it out again, but it just came yesterday and I couldn't make myself wait to break it out. So rocking the Stephon Diggs tonight. I don't have a Devin Singletary shirt. So, but that brings us to the topic for tonight. And tonight we're going to talk running backs. And it's kind of interesting as you and I were preparing for the show, this isn't the most dramatic position from a starting spot argument standpoint. It's not the most dramatic position from who's going to make the roster or the cut down day. So it's maybe a little different discussion tonight, and we'll get into some good topics of what we expect from last year to this year. But it's kind of funny how this is maybe one of the more defined and firmed up positions on the roster.
Yeah, and you know what? It's pretty young. That's what's exciting about it, too. Obviously the top two backs in Moss and Singletary are, some young running backs. I mean, they did it the right way as far as drafting them, in the middle rounds. And I just think they're two talented guys. And then, of course, Yeldon and, we're going to talk about the other guys that they brought in and that are going to be challenging for, running back 3, because obviously if everyone's healthy in Moss and Singletary, it's for running back 3. That we need to talk about and where the competition will be. But I'd say, a lot of the roles and what to expect from the running back position, especially the halfbacks, it's pretty set in stone, regardless of, when the season does start or whenever camp starts or any of that.
Yeah, and we'll start it out the same way we have in each show. I'm going to share a little bit about where the Bills find themselves from a financial standpoint and the roster as a whole. The nice part is running backs and fullbacks together, that youth translates here as well. And we're going to scroll way down this list. The Bills are 22nd in the NFL in running back and fullback spending. They're actually 24th in running back. The pay to DeMarco bumps them up a little bit. Sure. But there's not a ton of surprises. Heck, TJ Yeldon's our highest paid running back on the roster, $1.9 million. Tywan Jones, obviously a special teams ace there, and he's technically a running back, but not something we're expecting a ton of production from. Then you get the Singletary and Moss rookie contracts. Then you get, fan favorite Christian Wade and UDFA Antonio Williams. On the fullback side, you see the DeMarco contract, which was now reworked. So his expires this year. They took a little bit of a pay cut to help on the cap side, but still 1.9 million, so a healthy number. And then another UDFA and Reggie Gilliam, again, with that rookie contract. So a lot of really healthy ones, guys. If Gilliam or Antonio Williams were to make the contract, he'd be in the same, or make the roster, which I don't know that either are likely, but if they did, they'd have the same kind of control as the Levi Wallace, Robert Foster type. You'd have 4 years of control. We have 3 more years of Devin Singletary, 4 more years of Zach Moss. TJ Yeldon's contract does expire after this year. Tywan Jones only has a 1-year deal. So there's no long-term money except for the fact that we have Devin Singletary and Zach Moss combined for under $2 million a year for the next 3 years.
That is amazing. Okay, top of the list, TJ Yeldon. Your running back 3 is your highest paid running back. That is just, that's Brandon Beane at his finest, right? Again, adding those young running backs through the draft. And they're not just young, they're talented guys that are going to be here, at least their full contract, maybe more. And who knows? Yeldon. He's one of those guys that's going to be competing for a running back 3, and he's your highest paid guy, and he's still under $2 million. That's just a great job in roster construction. Something I'm sure that excites the hell out of you.
Oh yeah, this is how a modern NFL backfield is supposed to be put together, and that they did double down more quickly. We talked about that leading up to the draft a little bit, that in theory, you would normally wait 1 more year to draft the guy. And then, you have the 2 years of the rookie deal that alternates with the other guy. But it's an awesome problem to deal with, that you have both Singletary and Moss on these contracts. And we'll get into them. They'll obviously be the bulk of the show here. But before we get into that, each show we've kind of gone through and talked about, are there any surprises coming from the bottom? And I have a feeling I know the answer, but is there anything that you've seen in either, I'll put all 3 of them out there, Antonio Williams, Reggie Gilliam, or Christian Wade, that you see any sliver of hope that maybe they can be a camp darling? And how much do you think they're hurt maybe by not having the rookie mini camp and the OTAs and things like that, and is defined as what this room could be?
Yeah, anytime you miss, camp, reps, even just meeting with the coaches and guys in the room, that's a big loss. And so off the top, Christian Wade, obviously he had an uphill battle from the time he joined the Buffalo Bills. And I think it's almost a 0 chance that he actually makes the roster. Great story. But as I alluded to, prior to going live, I just think that there's a difference between developing and learning the game. And Christian Wade is on the side of learning the game. He's learning how to play this game. And for a running back, it's either put up or shut up. And there's no real time given to a running back for development, right? You either got it or you don't. That's why their shelf lives are so short. And, as good as Wade looked in those preseason games last year, don't get me wrong, was exciting. And you talked about, his vision on that one, I think it was what you said, screen, right? To the top of the screen. And, his vision was awful on that play. Probably could have scored a touchdown. And it's those type of things that, that a running back has or doesn't, especially in the NFL. And it's a little different from, obviously the game he played back home. So, I still want to see him pick up a block, because some of those blocks that he tried to pick up last year, he was playing patty cake. So I think he is beyond a long shot. Great story. I think that position and what they're trying to do from that standpoint of, expanding the NFL and players like that and bringing guys over like Wade, love it. Should do it. Definitely should do it. But I just don't think he has a chance to make the roster.
Yeah. I always try to talk myself through, okay, if this were to happen, what would that story be? How would it have happened? And, if you want to tell me that last year having an entire year of following around Frank Gore all season helped him, I can believe that. If you want to tell me that, he really started to soak more up being in that running back room each day, and that, he was on the roster per se, he was there and around the team and practicing and doing things, and that maybe that accelerated it. I do believe that, he is a world-class athlete. He ran a 4.41 or whatever it was at the Europe kind of tryout thing that they did. So, he is a world-class athlete. That's legit. But just the nuances that come there. The only path I can see is that maybe he gets another year of that, of soaking up maybe the Andre Roberts role, and as his contract expires, maybe they can talk themselves into him being a return specialist or something next year. They do have one more year where they can hide him on that special exemption for the International Pathways program, and that if they put him on the practice squad, they get to hide him as that. He was 11th, now it would be 13th, and with all the COVID stuff, maybe it expands to 16 or 18, but they get an extra one because of him. And, I'd love to think that those highlights translate, but just like you referenced there, even the ones that people bring up, like that screen pass where he almost scored, any other NFL running back would have scored because he would have stayed to the sideline, followed his blocks, and gone straight into the end zone.
It was hilarious. It was almost like that scene from Forrest Gump. He's kind of staring off, and then he gets the ball, and he just run. And he did. But then he could have scored, but he didn't. Forrest Gump scored, ran out of stadium pretty much. So I don't hate the crushed dreams. I think it's a very long shot.
I don't even think we need to talk about Antonio Williams. I think he is a camp invite. He wasn't even terribly productive at North Carolina, so you never know. Bigger surprises have happened. But
there is one thing I do want to mention about Antonio Williams that I noticed. Seems like that inside runner, that A to B gap, backside power runner, a little slasher inside. I don't want to compare him too much to Carlos Williams, but he's kind of got that one cut and go, up the middle type runner. But in the last, like you said, production in the last couple of years, 139 attempts in 2 years, 826 yards, 8 touchdowns. Yep. But the kicker with him is 7 out of 8 of those touchdowns were in the red zone. So that's something that maybe that role comes up if, say, hypothetically, if Moss is trying to fill that Gore role, something we're going to talk about later, something comes up and, maybe Williams is on a practice squad and they bring him up for that type of role. That's the only way I really think that he would be any type of a guy that, makes the roster or has a role on the team outside of, again, the practice squad probably.
And I actually think that's very likely for him just because there's so few guys total on the roster. Sometimes they'll bring in a 7th or 8th guy for camp. And since they're not doing that, he really is the only extra true running back here. So I think it's very likely he's got a pretty decent shot at this expanded practice squad.
Mac Brown, I was reading some stuff leading up to the show. Mac Brown talked about his leadership. That's obviously processy. And he's a great pass blocker. He can stick guys right in the hole right there, in those A and B gaps. So I think he has a role. He could have a role if something were to happen to, Moss, if something happens, during the season. We'll see, man. He's nothing special, but I do like him inside, the tackles, the A and B gaps, and obviously in the red zone.
It's at least something to focus on if you did, obviously, God forbid we get an injury during the year. It's at least nice to know there is a skill set that could translate, even if it's not as versatile as the other guys. The other guy that's out there that you've heard some people kind of talk up that if any UDFA outside Trey Adams has an outside shot at the roster, it's maybe this Reggie Gilliam. And Reggie Gilliam is a, fullback, H-back, tight end type of guy coming out of Toledo, had actually 6 blocked punts in college, which is a crazy stat to have, is, really fully dedicated to special teams, has the versatility. A couple video clips out there watching him run routes, and he looks very athletic and is able to move well. I don't know that I see a path in 2020 where he overtakes Patrick DeMarco, but I certainly could see a path where he makes the practice squad, and that nowadays NFL fullbacks, you need to check more boxes than just backfield fullback. So if you also can run some routes, you also can play special teams. I do think there's a path that he could be the 2021 guy filling that role. But is there anything that you saw in him or think of that could change maybe that pathway or really, threaten DeMarco's spot on the roster?
I think you nailed it. I think obviously special teams is something that the Bills love paying attention to and bringing in guys in. Even if that's the only way, the only route for a guy to make a roster, if he does something phenomenal on special teams, Heath Farwell and that staff, they want to bring him in and give him a shot and then maybe try to develop him as, at his position. And obviously fullback, it's a dying breed, a dying position. And as you had talked about, several times, who knows where DeMarco is after this season. So special teams is his way to get on the roster. I think it's going to be an uphill battle this year to make the game day roster, because DeMarco does all the things that Gilliam does. He's a leader as well. I mean, he's obviously one of the better special teams guys and lauded as one of the better leaders on the team. I mean, a lot of guys look to him, and he's that locker room guy. And as much as fans want to just dismiss him and try to replace him, he holds a few roles that are high on the list of this staff.
Well, and I think some fans might not realize he played more special team snaps than he did offensive snaps. He was a core special teams player and one of those top 6 or 8 guys that play 4 different special teams units. So that's a role someone has to play. That's not just something you can get rid of. Then it also wasn't 0 offensive snaps. I think it was 112 offensive snaps. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's still a legitimate amount of offensive snaps that he's in there when you want that heavier set in there. So it's not nothing. But, yeah, I wouldn't mind a bit more versatility. I wouldn't mind a bit more athleticism that's in there and somebody who can do those other jobs. So we'll see where that goes. But I agree. I don't know that I see that changing in 2020 with both the on and off field value that he brings. So our first real question we'll dive into here is one that, I think got brought, all of us saw this last year, but a recent article in The Athletic by Shale Kapadia talked and actually showed statistically that the Bills' run offense was really good, except for when Frank Gore was on the field, and it was really, really rough. And you and I were talking about this kind of in preparing for the show. What do you obviously some of it was, we saw towards the end of the year that there was just a little too much wear on the tires. Frank Gore is an all-time NFL warrior, a Hall of Famer, and an awesome dude. I was excited by having him on the team and seeing him go to 3rd in the NFL rushing list while he was on the Bills. But obviously towards the end of the year, it was just, too much wear on those tires. And that Singletary is the more talented guy right now in this current phase. How much of that disparity in production do you think was the talent disparity versus how much was, oh, hey, look, here comes Lee Smith and Patrick DeMarco and Frank Gore. I wonder what they're going to do. And maybe not putting him in the most advantageous scheme positions.
Yeah, I mean, it's not one or the other. It's tough to say, man. Obviously, Motor was, when he was healthy, after, a slow start to the beginning of the year, he obviously was a better talent. But the problem with Motor last year and most running backs in the rookie seasons is pass protection, right? So, there were some nice pickups by Motor, some good plays where instead of going for the play action fake, he was picking up the pass block, calling that off because they were sending a blitz. But overall, he struggled to pick up blocks in the passing game. And I think that's what if Gore did anything well last year, it was pass blocking. That's what he's known for. He obviously, he lost some juice in his legs, and that it was painful to watch because obviously Gore over the last decade or so, he's been one of the most dependable backs, but also one of the most technically sound running backs. So, I mean, he always sticks to his keys. He's always hitting the hole when he should. He's patient. He knows how to set up his blocks. I mean, he really did it in any scheme, any kind of run blocking concept. He could carry out the run game regardless of what the score was or how many guys were on the box. But last year, it was just too obvious from a tell standpoint. You always heard everyone talk about, well, Gore's in, obviously they're running it. I mean, when he was in, and it's something you and I talked about, I mean, they were running it 55% of the time. They were going to run it. And when they passed, he wasn't likely to go out. He was going to stay in a block and be that 6th blocker because they weren't going to keep Dawson Knox, Tyler Kroft in on a passing play. So it was kind of obvious when, he was in. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of times when Josh Allen was under center, they brought in Lee Smith and they had Gore in. They run play action. They had a lot of the deep shots or those deep comeback routes on the outside, one-on-ones, those deep comeback routes open because the defense was keying. So this is the interesting, dynamic that we need to pay attention to this next season is with that tell gone, because you got to think about it. If defenses are keying on that, Dable purposely called specific plays to get those deep shots down the field, to get those deep outbreaking routes off play action. So not to give it up, but almost to dare to be like, hey, look, we're running this up the middle just to get him to bite for later on in the game. Yeah, and sometimes it was only two guys in a route. One guy, it'd be John Brown, and usually like early in the year it was like a Zay Jones, sometimes Cole Beasley. They would fill guys in out at wide receiver too, but a lot of times Dable would use that tell, to get those chunk plays down the field, but chunk plays, to the sideline, again, deep comebacks, outbreaking routes, stuff like that. Not stuff obviously on go routes and stuff like that, but chunk plays, 15, 20, 22 yards. That Josh could, just drop back from under center, hit the top of his drop in rhythm, like he says he loves to do, because his footwork is quick. It's not, you're not thinking about it, you're just hitting it. And, so Dable did use that. So the dynamic to pay attention to this year is now you got top two backs in Motor and Moss that are, obviously can also catch the ball out of the backfield or receiver threats. I mean, last year when Motor was in, Greg, I mean, they passed the ball 64% of the time. But the great thing about that was, obviously, the box wasn't as loaded. Yeah. That's something I'm sure we'll talk about a little more. The box wasn't as loaded for him because, the defense was worried about pass. But when they ran it, he was super effective versus lighter boxes. And that's, again, that may change this year now that you have two backs that are, dual threats in the run and pass game.
Well, and I think that leads perfectly into the next question is that everyone keeps talking about how, oh, great, we can just plug Moss into the Gore role. And it almost makes me frustrated because I don't want the Gore role to exist. I don't want that to be a telltale, obvious play. I would love to have. Now, I don't know that I mean that in the sense that I want Moss and Singletary to be a 50-50 split. I do think Singletary will get more usage. But I hope that we now see both of them in variable schemes, setups, 12, 11, empty sets out in motion, all kinds of different things that both of them can do that. And you keep the offense guessing so that the substitution isn't a tell anymore because you're able to do that. So how much do you think, I mean, some of it, I get the skill set comparison that if we're going to run somebody between the tackles, it kind of makes sense that Moss has that thunder element to him. Right. How much do you think is a plug and play to Gore's role versus maybe a little bit more versatile use from last year that we saw in Singletary and taking advantage of the full skill set for someone like Moss?
Okay, so let's start with what role did he play, right? Yeah. What role did Gore play last year? And there are three main situations that Gore was the running back: 3rd and 4th down and 1 to 3 situations, so short yardage. Josh Allen led that specific category on 3rd and 4th and short in attempts, and he carried the ball 52% of the time. Obviously, a lot of those are 3rd and 4th and 1s. Gore was at 32%. Motor was at 14%. So, again, it was either Allen or Gore on those 3rd and short situations. Gore was 14 attempts, 10 yards, and a touchdown. 7% touchdown percentage. First down percentage of 28.6, which is not that good. And then, of course, broken tackle percentage. He had 0% on 3rd and 4th and short last year. That's where Gore was as a runner last year on 3rd and 4th and short. He did not break a tackle in that situation. So, okay, that's one category. The other one is, okay, you're trying to close out a game, trying to run a clock out. We call it the 4-minute drill. 4 minutes and under, you want to run the ball out. Gore was number 1 in attempts in that category. He accounted for 49% of those runs under 4 minutes. That's 25 attempts. He had 93 yards, 1 touchdown, 16% first down percentage, and a broken tackle percentage of 12%. Those are all really low. So he struggled to, obviously get 1 first down. That's what the 4-minute drill is. You want to get 1 first down, get that, clock running and try to run the ball out. He was terrible in that category last year. And then finally the red zone, right? It's something we talked about. Antonio Williams. Gore carried the ball 37% of the time. That was number 1 on the team. 26 attempts, 33 yards, only 2 touchdowns. And again, a broken tackle percentage is 0. So, I mean, it was tough for him last year. And all those numbers I just rattled off, those situations are partly why, Frank Gore had one of the highest, stacked box percentages in the league. So those certain and specific situations kind of skew the numbers as far as, whether there's a stacked box versus Gore, an unstacked box or lighter box versus Singletary. So where does Moss come in on this? Obviously, Moss, he's younger. He's got better legs at this point. He is a huge tackle breaker. I mean, last year he broke 31.6% of his tackles. That was only second behind Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Obviously, if there's one thing that translates in the NFL from college, it's tackle breaking, whatever type of stat you want to, put it, whether it's your elusiveness, all that.
Oh yeah, some lump it with elusiveness, but he rated well in all of them.
He breaks tackles. He makes guys miss. And his teammate, Devin Singletary, over the last 3 years, he was also, tops in those categories as well, his last couple of years at FAU. So Moss can easily fill the roles that Gore held last year. But we come back to your main question, do we want to have that specific role? No, going into the draft, Greg, all we talked about is getting another dynamic back, not a guy that is just a power guy, not a guy that is just a big, 6'1", 6'2", 230-pound back. No, we want guys that can run and catch and block. So Moss can do all of those things. Is he a guy that's going to run a lot of routes from out wide? No, I think Devin Singletary is going to see a lot more of that because he was underutilized in that regard. So I think Moss can fill the roles that Gore had last year, but do I think he should carry all those roles? No, I think Devin Singletary is sneaky good, especially in the red zones and the short yardage situations. They just didn't give it to him. I mean, if you go back and look at Singletary's stats in those areas, in those categories, he was tops in all of them. So I think they need to ride Devin Singletary. I don't know percentage wise. I mean, what do you think is a good percentage split between Moss and Singletary?
My guess is pretty close to 60-40. I don't know if I would say that it starts out earlier as 65-35, 70-30, and Singletary is getting a pretty healthy portion of it. And as Moss earns trust and gets into those situations where they see him in the NFL picking up the right blitz, they see him in the NFL being able to maintain control on the ball, that his breaking tackle rates do translate. I think you see that, and by the end of the year, I think you have it being closer to 60-40. And I could even see a couple games that if, the Bills have a game where they have a lead in the second half, he could have some games where he leads the team in touches because he's the one making them pay and milking the clock at the end.
Yeah, hands down, man. And like I said, I don't know what percentage, but I think it's pretty clear that, Motor is going to be given the shot to carry the rock, to be that primary ball carrier this coming season. And, I'm excited. Yeah. I mean, both of these guys, yes, they don't have that breakaway speed, but it's all about vision and it's all about, making guys miss. And these two guys are elite in those categories. Yeah. And, everyone talks about how slow Singletary ran his 40. I mean, he was, top 10 in breakaway percentage last year per Pro Football Focus. He had 14 runs of 15 plus yards, which was tied for fourth. The three guys ahead of him, Raheem Mostert, Joe Mixon, and Carson, the running back from the Seahawks. So you can say all you want about, we need his speed back. Singletary doesn't have that breakaway speed. Well, guess what? If you have vision and you can make guys miss, you'll get explosive runs.
Well, and Aaron and I joked about it a little bit during the season in that I genuinely think I counted twice all season where it mattered. I think there were two plays where if he was a 4.42 guy instead of a 4.66 guy, he probably had the angle to beat a guy down the sideline, and one of those 25-yard runs would have been a 50-yard touchdown. But two all season. Like, it's not like this is he has great short area quickness. He has elite contact balance, and he still has acceleration. Like had how many 15+ yard runs?
14.
Yeah. So it's not like he's, 4 yards in a cloud of dust here. Like he's consistently breaking off in the NFL. 15+ yard runs are big runs, and he's right there at the top of the NFL in those kind of categories. That's all you want. And it's really funny. They've clearly shown that Brandon Beane and Dan Morgan and Joe Shane, they have a type in the NFL, and what they care about is contact balance, vision, elusiveness, and breaking tackles. And that, sure, there's a threshold. You can't be running a 4.9 or something like that. Yeah. But it just that track speed at the running back position just doesn't come up all that often. There's not that many Chris Johnsons and Jamal Charles out there that are busting off plays like that. It's just not that common.
Yeah, and again, it's all about there are plays where the run blocking is not going to be there. One guy's going to miss a block, and you got to make a guy miss. You got to play about the scheme, as you always hear me talk about. And Moss and Singletary can do that. on just about any play. And so they're going to turn plays that could be -3s, -2s, -1s into +12s, +15s, +27s. Will they have an 80-yard touchdown? Probably not. But either way, you have running backs that are elusive, that have tremendous vision, which to me, in my opinion, vision is the number one trait that a running back has to have. And again, they also can pitch in the passing game, and I think that's where I want to see Motor's next step, in pass blocking, but also as a receiver, because when they go to their empty sets, which they did the sixth most last year, Singletary, when he's out wide, he has to be a threat, even if it's just a 4 to 6 yard stop or comeback route. He's got to get the ball out there, because if you put him out there out wide in space, get him the ball versus man coverage, we saw what he can do to guys out in space. He can make guys miss. He's obviously elusive, and he's just a playmaker. I mean, if there's one thing about this offense, I know they've added some top tier talent, Stephon Diggs, John Brown, Cole Beasley over the years, and they added some great athletes. But at the running back position, they want dependable. They want, guys that can make guys miss, that have great vision, all those traits that we talked about. And they just want consistency. They want to trust their running backs, because at, some given times, some critical times, they're going to go to these guys, whether they're young or not, and they're expected to produce in big time situations.
And you joked about some of those plays that, getting more than what's there. One of my favorite highlights of the season was a play against Denver. Devin Singletary's running just a small off tackle play to the left and breaks 4 tackles in just those quick little stutter step side jukes where he kind of stops short and the guy, goes by. And it was a 2-yard gain. It was a 2-yard gain that should have been a 2-yard loss, but he juked 4 guys and ends up getting run out of bounds for a 2-yard gain. It just is so amazing to see how he can do the same thing over again, just stutter stepping these NFL defenders. And I don't know what it is, but his just that's kind of unnatural vision that he can see guys that, are off in the peripheral that other people just don't see. It's just incredible. And when you asked earlier about the split between Moss and Singletary, you see how they used Singletary last year, kind of easing him in. He missed that chunk where he pulled the hammy in the Giants game, kind of eased him in, then went later on. Sadly, that's the same thing. Frank Gore, I think people remember this part of the season, the 1.3, 2.4, 2.4, 1.2. They remember that stretch. We probably don't win that Tennessee game without Frank Gore. He was a key part in keeping us in that Patriots game. He played well at the beginning of the year. But look, right here, after that drop-off, 3.5, 5.4, 6.4, 4.25, and then just you could tell where he hit the wall later on in the year. Hopefully what we see is you have Devin Singletary being that lead guy early on. He doesn't hit the wall because obviously second-year player, he's not going to have that same problem, and that we're probably not going to see this degree of incline for Zach Moss, but I bet it's a similar build where it's a fair amount of 6 and 8 carry games early on, and then as the season goes, a lot of those 15s, 14s, 17s where he's maybe even with Singletary and carries, and then Singletary gets a few more catches for more touches.
Yeah, and the thing that I'm most excited about with this pairing is because, last year, the Bills were top 5 in run plays that had a puller. Obviously, they love the power run, but their bread and butter last year was the pin and pull. And it's one of the playlists I'm compiling from last year because, they are so good. Anyone on the offensive line can pull, obviously, and any given defensive front, they can, change the run call and have someone else block down and someone else pull. So they can adjust to every defensive front. So, and then when you have a center like Mitch Morse to have that fifth guy being able to pull and get out in space. I mean, anytime he pulled, Devin Singletary was breaking a big run on these pin and pull runs. And so, defense is going to be chasing around Singletary on those, semi perimeter runs that kind of hit that alleyway, just outside the tight end, but just inside the force player. So not like a speed pitch out or anything like that, because obviously these running backs don't have that speed. So to watch, the defense chase Singletary this coming year, and then here comes, Zach Moss, the hammer to come in, and this guy, I mean, he is stacked, dude. I mean, and he runs so compact. And I said, scouting him, he always covers the ball, obviously really good ball security. And then, he just breaks tackles with his arms. Guys just slide off of his biceps. It's nuts. So to watch that dynamic, it's, again, they're not game-breaking type speed guys, but they're going to be guys that the defense is going to have trouble, going from one to the other, because they are slightly different backs in that regard. So it's going to be fun, man. I'm excited about the position for the future.
And it's funny you bring that pin and pull together, that you've done some great breakdowns of it. And Brandon Thorne talked about it on the offensive line show. He said that a lot of people don't realize he thought the Bills have one of the most physical, nasty offensive lines in the NFL, and that it comes in no more obvious of a spot than those pin and pull scenarios where you can see Quentin Spain is licking his chops, that the guy over top of Morris has no idea that he's going to lay the hammer down while Morris pulls out and goes and pulls, and that Deion Dawkins will do the same thing to get Spain free, and that just you don't know which direction it's coming from, you don't know where it's coming from, and they love it when they just get to blindside that guy and hammer him down. And that kind of physicality really wears on a defense as the game goes, that you don't know where it's coming from, the versatility. All five guys can move and get out there. And don't get me wrong, they're not all, graceful ballerinas out there. But I joke all the time, I don't understand the physics of how Quentin Spain moves the way that he does, but he does. Like, I don't want to dismiss the fact that just because he's an enormous human, that he still does. He explodes out of his stance and gets out there and doesn't mind getting himself out in motion. And when you have the running backs they have now that can be able to really take advantage of that, I can't wait to see what Dable, schemes up to be able to put them in those spots.
Yeah. And, a lot of people talk about Spain, and he's not all that good out in space, but on these pin and pull runs, what's so great about it is we're not asking him to pull out wide and go pick up a corner. What defenses do to the Bills, because they lack the speed, is they box. They box the run in. So that outside player, that outside linebacker, that nickel corner will take outside in approach and keep the play inside, right? Contain it inside. Well, guess what? That plays right to Spain's, traits, because he doesn't have to pull far. That guy's coming in and he's containing that run. Guess what? He just kicks him out, cuts him. He doesn't have to chase him out in space. So it's not that long of a pull. And, Spain's range on pulls maybe is limited, but I'll tell you what, he's as you mentioned, he's one of the nastier guys on that offensive line. And to kind of flip it to the pass game real quick, Spain was heavily relied upon by Mitch Morse in identifying defensive fronts in front seven and where they need to be sliding protections and all that, and identifying the mics and whatnot. He was extremely helpful to Mitch Morse, and Mitch Morse said that at the end of the year. So a lot of good things when it comes to the running back position. Obviously, running backs more than not are only as good as their offensive line is, and the Bills appear to be bringing back all five starters. So, I'm excited, man. I'm excited to see them build upon the run concepts they had in 2019.
I agree completely. I think it's exciting that, having the opportunity to gel together, adding in guys like Darrell Williams and Evan Bayham to, add to the competition and at worst be experienced depth, and being able to bring that back in the sense that they are, a lot of times, and I know Matthew Fairburns talked about this, that sometimes the term continuity gets thrown out there as a buzzword, and really it's an excuse not to maybe make the hard decision, and that sometimes it could be a crutch. But this year, it is universally understood that there's going to be a huge advantage to the teams that have genuine continuity, bringing back the same offensive coordinator, the same, play calling scheme, the same quarterback coach, the same offensive line, the same quarterback. So many of those things are really going to have value, and that, I'm not sad that we're starting out this season against teams in the division who both had a ton of turnover and change in the Jets and the Dolphins. That, that's nice to be able to kind of get that run going to be able to do that. So I'm hopeful that we see that benefit. I'm hopeful that it's as simple as fresh legs and an explosive, elusive tackle breaker like Zach Moss is an upgrade over Frank Gore, that we see a second year leap forward from Devin Singletary, and that ideally they make it so Josh Allen can be more of a threat in the running game than a guy who needed to carry the ball 7, 8, 9 times a game. Maybe he can do 3 or 4 times a game. And some of those scrambles, he stops short and throws the ball. I'd love to be able to get to that point where we can depend on them and that he's only having to use his legs in those critical spots and as a threat to, really keep the defense honest. And you saw that transition from guys like Russell Wilson in their career, that they don't stop running, but now they use it more to threaten the defense than to have to carry the load and be that 600-yard a game or 600-yard a season kind of runner. So I think this running game can be an important part of it. You see there's some questions in the chat about, wanting to maybe not be a run first team. And we weren't a run first team last year. We passed the ball more than we ran, but we were still in the bottom half of the NFL. I don't think we're all of a sudden going to become the most pass happy team, but there's a lot of metrics that show the Bills ran the ball on early downs less than average. They were actually 8th in the NFL in early down, neutral game script passing. And I think they're still going to mix that in. And I hope we're still run heavy because that means we're milking a lot of clocks at the end of these games. So Erik, any final thoughts for the folks here while you're together? Any upcoming video breakdowns you can let the folks know about?
Yeah, like I said, I'm still making it through the Dallas game, and I'm going to finish the last quarter of the season and the wild card game. And then, like I said, I'll try to put out the concepts so that you can – obviously, they're going to be carried over this year in this offense. So, trying to get that out there so that everyone can, get some knowledge on, the offense that Brian Daboll is running and how he's, trying to play to Josh Allen and the talent that he has on that side of the ball. So it's been a long run trying to do that. It's taking a few months, but eventually by the end of this, we'll have a library over the next couple of years as Josh continues to develop. We get to see areas and build up that library and build up those videos so that we can honestly get a good opinion on Josh Allen, because a lot of outsiders, they're naysayers, they're doubters. But obviously, guys like myself and guys that watch all of the Bills film, 10 times over, we can see that development. And I just want people to understand, that there are a lot of variables on any given play. It's not all on Josh. And so, doing these breakdowns has been fun for me just because I'm actually getting to learn Brian Daboll's offense and how he's setting Josh up, to one side of the field or to the other. So it's been fun. It's been long. It's been tough, but I'm sure you guys are enjoying it. And especially during this downtime of the year, man, I mean, what better way to fill that time with some Bills content and to see what Josh Allen developing in his career.
No, I appreciate it, man. I think they've been awesome. It's been so helpful to be able to see just, the different things you're picking up, the different concepts, and some of the terms that you see people throw around as kind of football jargon and either pretending to know what they're talking about or not helping explain to people what they're talking about. I think you do an awesome job being able to kind of break that down and make it digestible. And that's what we're looking to do here at Cover One. Check us out. Everything we have going on at cover1.net. Come on over. Always having fun on the Slack channel, having fun. Find Erik and I both on Twitter, Erik J. Turner and Greg Tompsett. Follow us at Cover One. Check out everything we have going on. Other than that, really appreciate it. You guys have been awesome in the chat. Everything we have going, you guys will see more of these as the offseason progresses. We'll continue on with 4 more of these shows to finish out all the position previews. But you've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.